Count Dooku is probably the worst Star Wars character of all time. Most importantly, he never becomes a real threat. Count Dooku is probably the worst Star Wars character of all time. Most importantly, he never becomes a real threat. Count Dooku is probably the worst Star Wars character of all time. Most importantly, he never becomes a real threat.
What orders from Mordor, my lord? What does the High command?
We have work to do.
I couldn't believe some of the things they wrote about the prequels, you know? I mean, but really, beyond, I didn't like it. You ruined my childhood, and I'm still angry about the way they treated Jake Lloyd. He was only 10 years old, that boy, and he did exactly what George wanted him to do. Believe me, I understand clunky dialogue. So I almost got hornswoggled in that documentary where they weren't calling it The People versus George Lucas at the time, but I could tell from the questions they were asking me, it was an open invitation to trash George.
George Lucas raped our childhood. 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 George Lucas raped our childhood.
And I have issues with George, but I love that man.
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized, and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. You know, it's not much fun, and you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way. I don't like that. I never did. I started out in experimental films, and I want to go back to experimental films. But of course, nobody wants to see experimental films.
The main thing is to protect these characters. Make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
I'm curious that the Force doesn't get muddled into a bunch of garbly-gook.
Can I just say, though, a lot of times I would say to Ryan, we got to think about the fans. And he said, no, we got to think about the story, and we got to think about our movie. Which
Welcome back to Revenge of the Prequels, everyone. Now, I'm going to make this opening monologue short and sweet because I don't know about you, but I'm as anxious as can be to be done with this piece of shit video, as I'm sure many of you are. But sadly, I need to give these disclaimers for the very few of you that don't have the mental capacity to understand despite 13 other bloody videos. Anyway, firstly, Revenge of the Prequels is an ongoing response series that responds to terrible argumentation against the Star Wars prequels that many creators have been spouting without challenge for years. The series does not discriminate. In other words, talk shit, get hit, and Cosmonaut's simply the latest name on the list. However, do not confuse my insults for my arguments, because they are two very different things. And it's not hard to distinguish between the two. Secondly, Episode 2 was demonetized without valid reasoning, and I can't predict when the next demonetization will occur. So don't forget to check out the Patreon link and the join button below if you'd like to support the channel. In addition to that, there's also the newly made channel merchandise store with official Revenge of the Prequels attire. If you'd like to kill two birds, the ones of looking sexy as fuck, and a middle finger to the prequel-hating dick nuggets out there with one excellent stone, link in the description. Now to more interesting stuff. I love this series, but sadly I cannot respond to every single video in this type of format, and many of these videos get sent my way. So with that said, check out the channel's weekly podcast, particularly episodes 5, 8, and 9. These particular episodes are a live stream format dissection of various videos regarding the prequels. So far we have covered Retarded Matthew, Discount Dr. Robotnik, and The Amazing Ass Clown. The podcast is a work in progress, long in nature, but entertaining nonetheless, so I highly suggest you check it out and be on the alert for future installments. There's one every week. Not all will be Revenge of the Prequels, but the ones that are will be clearly specified. And finally, I'd like to fix a small error I made in the previous video. When Cosmonaut says Yoda tells Obi-Wan to kill Anakin, and I countered with no, he explicitly didn't tell him to do that, I missed a small detail When seconds prior Yoda says, "Destroy the Sith, we must." However, not only was killing a mass murdering psychopath like Palpatine and Anakin completely justified given the circumstances, but Yoda tells Luke he has to confront Vader in Return of the Jedi, which could imply a lot of things, not necessarily to kill, but he still convinces Luke to take action.
Then I am a Jedi. Not yet. One thing remains. Vader. You must confront Vader. Then, only then, a Jedi will you be. And confront him you will.
Not to mention that this is a wiser and more reserved and older Master Yoda than in Episode 3, which means he could be implying a different approach for Luke. But in Revenge of the Sith, the Jedi confronting Vader and Palpatine with a fight to the death despite killing living, breathing individuals, not strictly speaking being a Jedi custom, this does play into another theme of Revenge of the Sith, that given the right circumstances, the Jedi and the Sith aren't all that different. I don't like to use themes to disguise poor writing, let me make that clear, and I don't think Obi-Wan and Yoda opting to fight the Sith is poor writing at all. But the point I'm going to make in this video is that how the Jedi conduct themselves in Revenge of the Sith is meant to raise a few eyebrows, but you'll see as we progress. So now with all that said, and that mistake amended, let's begin the final part of this response.
This is it, guys. The last prequel, and this is the one that people say is the good one.
Well, that's inaccurate. The prequels are awesome, this just happens to be the best one. And I go out on a limb to say the best Star Wars movie ever made.
And I will admit that it's not nearly as bad as the other two. But it's still not good.
Wow, you really are lying to yourself, man. Hope you all are as excited as I am to watch him grasp at these straws.
Watching Attack of the Clones really fucked me up, guys. But I'm gonna be honest, when I got to this movie, I was ready to tear into it, but it's not as bad as I remember. However, this movie still has all the same problems as the last two, except this time you don't feel like you're in a coma while you're watching it. This is the movie that people meme on the most, and I think these memes have kind of convinced everyone that this movie's better than it is.
No, the memes just took something brilliant and made it god tier.
Because if we have all these fun memories of it, then it can't be that bad of a movie, right? Kind of reminds me of another movie I've talked about with a rabid fan base.
Yeah, and you were just as retarded then, so why would I expect anything better from you now at this point?
Oh, I'm just goofing. New boot goofing.
Now this movie is set during the Clone War. This title crawl explains that Coruscant was attacked and Palpatine was kidnapped off screen. What the fuck, man?
Hey, you're the one who wanted the title crawl to get straight to the point and spent the last two movies bitching about politics, so I'm sorry, but in this particular instance, you don't get to complain about shit. You're just trying to move the goalpost.
Now, yeah, you're supposed to watch the Clone Wars cartoon to see that stuff happening. And it's really cool in that show. But come the fuck on, dude. If I'm showing someone these movies for the first time, this is the dumbest shit ever. This incredibly significant event is just not shown at all. Honestly, that would have been a really fucking cool intro to the movie. Yeah, it would have made the movie really long, but I don't know, you can trim some of this other dumb shit.
Well, apparently the first cut of episode 3 was over 4 hours long, so large chunks of footage were obviously cut out. On the Blu-ray release, you'll see the original early animations for how grandiose Obi-Wan's pursuit of General Grievous was supposed to be. 2 variations of Master Shaak Ti's death, once on General Grievous' ship, and in another scene she gets executed by Anakin himself during the Purge, as well as parts of Obi-Wan and Anakin's infiltration being cut as well. As much as I like these additions to the movie, and think it was a shame that they were cut, they really don't serve much purpose for the overall story. Palpatine being kidnapped was fine to happen off-screen. Revenge of the Sith is episode 3. It has been designed to be part 3 of the 6-part saga, and you are meant to have the context of episodes 1 and 2. We didn't need to see his kidnapping. As a matter of fact, seeing that provide a spoiler for the audience since he himself was the one who orchestrated it. And this becomes more and more apparent as the film progresses. And I'll admit, this part is a tad messy, but the motivation as a whole was to lure Anakin back from the Outer Rim sieges to test him against Count Dooku. Do it.
But the loss of Count Dooku.
His death was a necessary loss. Soon I will have a new apprentice.
Which is confirmed by George Lucas's commentary on the Blu-ray.
Is there any significance to the Kashyyyk scenes? No. They just wanted to show us Chewbacca, and why does Chewbacca look like that?
No, the Kashyyyk scenes showed us more of the Clone Wars. World building, once more showing us the size and scale of the galactic conflict. And in addition to that, gave us a reason for why Yoda wasn't around for the Jedi Purge and how he survived. Because had Yoda been there, I guarantee the Purge would have been very unsuccessful.
Is it just me or does he look weird in this movie?
What's wrong with your face?
Wow, you're nothing but a circle jerk panderer, right? I've lost even more respect for you now.
Oh, also, the title crawl tells us that there are heroes on both sides. Evil is everywhere. What the fuck does that mean? There aren't any heroes on the evil side. George, you need to proofread your work.
No, maybe you should proofread. And I'll admit, the wording is a little strange. My interpretation of that line was simply that there's two sides, the Republic and the Separatists. The Separatists aren't necessarily the bad guys, just an opposing side within the galactic conflict, with their own heroes fighting the battle. But evil is also on both sides. I have no doubt the Separatist movement absolutely views Count Dooku and General Grievous as heroes to the cause. And look, I don't want to be the guy who preaches on and on about themes, but there is a very clear idea behind Revenge of the Sith that evil isn't so black and white, and that there are moral greys. Matter of fact, Lucas uses this to great effect to show us just how similar both the Jedi and the Sith can be given the right set of circumstances, and how seeing the film's events from Anakin's perspective warps his once black and white viewpoint on morality. Let's take a look at Anakin's views on the Jedi and the Sith from the first third of the movie.
You did well, Anakin. He was too dangerous to be kept alive.
Yes, but he was an unarmed prisoner. I shouldn't have done that. It's not the Jedi way. The Jedi use their power for good.
Good is a point of view, Anakin.
The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves.
And the Jedi don't.
The Jedi are selfless. They only care about others.
Now let's look at all of the pieces that made his view shift, as well as his refined perspective in the final confrontation.
Anakin, I told you it would come to this. I was right. The Jedi are taking over.
You must sense what I have come to suspect. The Jedi Council want control of the Republic. They're planning to betray me.
The oppression of the Sith will never return. You have lost.
Remember back to your early teachings. All who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi.
Our allegiance is to the Senate, not to its leader, who has managed to stay in office long after his term has expired.
The Senate demanded that he stay longer.
Yes, but use your feelings, Anakin. Something is out of place.
They asked you to spy on me, didn't they?
You're asking me to do something against the Jedi Code. Against the Republic, against a mentor and a friend. That's what's out of place here. Why are you asking this of me?
The Council is asking you.
The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way.
Do it.
He was too dangerous to be kept alive.
I shouldn't have done that. It's not the Jedi way.
I am going to end this once and for all.
You can't. He must stand trial.
He has control of the Senate and the courts. He's too dangerous to be left alive.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I will do what I must.
The Jedi use their power for good.
Good is a point of view, Anakin.
Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil! From my point of view, the Jedi are evil! Well, then you are lost!
So anyway, this movie starts with something unique to Star Wars. A long take. And right off the bat, it shows us that this movie is actually fucking trying. Now, some people would say that a long take doesn't count if it's a CGI long take. But that's not actually true at all. It actually takes a lot of work to have a computer render this much shit all at once without cutting. The guys over at the Corridor crew actually have a really good video explaining this better than my dumbass can.
Wow, I honestly didn't think you'd actually give credit where credit is due. So I'll respond in kind. Well done. But you do realize it was the dumbasses at Red Letter Media that you keep referencing that preyed on their audience's ignorance and tried to pass that off as an actual argument, right?
Number 2, that opening shot is really impressive. Because it's like, one long, uncut shot or something. No. You see, I'm sure this was done intentionally by Lucasfilm. 1, so there'd be something memorable about the start of this film. And 2, so that idiots will tell other idiots about it, because at this point there's nothing impressive about visual effects. They don't dazzle the audience anymore like they did in the past. Now it's just a bunch of crap all over the screen made by computer animators that wish they chose other careers.
Basically, artists have to go in, and then little by little they build up pieces of it on like individual simulations or setups or environments, and they render them all out one by one. They just put it all together layer by layer.
So yeah, I think this is a really cool opening, only ruined by the fact that we need to watch Anakin fight these dumb gimmicky robots. And that's kind of a problem that this whole movie has. You might find yourself almost enjoying a scene, but it just doesn't stop. The scenes in this movie go on for way too long. They really overstay their welcome.
And we are back to grasping at straws. Before you guys were saying there wasn't enough action. Now you're saying the movie is too bloated with action. And no, that's not a straw man. That's a common and heavily conflicting argument by the people who try to discredit these movies. Go back and watch the first 4 parts of this response. Cosmonaut won't shut up about how episodes 1 and 2 apparently put him to a coma because of all the political stuff. And again, in this video, I mentioned previously that there was so much cut from this very chase scene. If I actually showed it to you, it would blow your mind what Lucas originally intended.
Oh, also, we now have Anakin doing something that he didn't do at all in the last movie. Good deeds.
I'm gonna go help him out.
See, in episode 2, Anakin is really fucking sinister. But it feels like George was like, oh shit, I made him too evil. I gotta remind people that he's supposed to be a good guy.
Anakin did plenty of good deeds. In the first 2 prequels, he protected Padme, he protected Obi-Wan, and he was trying to find his dying mother. Anakin was never sinister without cause in Attack of the Clones. And need I remind you of the Phantom Menace?
Mom, you say the biggest problem in this universe is nobody helps each other.
And now in this movie, he feels like a completely different character than he was in the last one.
If by completely different character you mean years of war and having gotten married to Padme has matured him as a character, then yes, he is a completely new character. Say it with me, folks. This is called character development. Character development. Development. Character development. Capiche?
But these jarring character shifts are not justified within this narrative. We are supposed to see him killing Dooku as a bad thing, but based on everything we've seen in the series so far, there's nothing wrong with him killing Dooku. Nobody said Obi-Wan was supposed to spare Darth Maul. Our heroes never spared any of the enemies they've been mindlessly mowing down.
Okay, this actually brings up a good point, and I covered this slightly in my previous videos. Basically, I disagree with the Jedi's rules of when they are allowed to kill someone. However, the rules themselves, as I showed before, are susceptible to being broken, which also aids in Anakin's turn, seeing that the Jedi can be giant hypocrites, and given the right set of circumstances, the code doesn't mean shit. However, the reason why Anakin was brutal in executing Count Dooku, even though I think it was perfectly justified given what Dooku had done, and how dangerous Dooku was, Dooku, unlike Darth Maul and Jango Fett, was completely unarmed and helpless at that very moment. Not to mention Jango Fett was killed in the middle of a raging battle. They couldn't exactly take him prisoner. Killing Dooku in cold blood was a brutal act and very unbecoming of a Jedi, but was ultimately the right thing to do. Just like killing Palpatine, despite being completely unarmed, was perfectly justified given that he's responsible for countless deaths, and has control over the government bureaucracy, which means he will never face conventional justice. The Jedi Code prevents Mace from killing Palpatine, but he attempts to anyway because he knows the stakes. Hell, if he actually did kill Palpatine, maybe he would have been tempted to the dark side.
If he does not give up his emergency powers after the destruction of Grievous, then he should be removed from office.
The Jedi Council would have to take control of the Senate in order to secure a peaceful transition.
To a dark place this line of thought will carry us. Great care we must take.
Having just committed a murder, essentially. And again, this serves the underlying theme of how good and evil isn't necessarily defined by Jedi and Sith. Since given the right circumstances, they can be incredibly similar, blurring the lines of morality between the factions.
I just like to think that everybody told Anakin that bad guys have to stand trial, even though they don't follow that rule themselves. Again, if you stop to think about the movie, it makes a lot less sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've just explained this.
This is the movie where Anakin's supposed to fall to the dark side, but his fall is not very convincing.
And let me guess, your argument is just going to completely forget that Attack of the Clones and the Phantom Menace exist to try and paint the picture of Anakin's turn being sudden and abrupt and unjustified. because that's the only way you can make it work, and it's nothing I haven't heard before. One of these days, I hope to come across one of you that actually gives me a challenge in these videos.
From a storytelling perspective, it makes no sense that he changes his mind so quickly based on no information. But anyway, we'll talk more about that when we get to the actual shift in morality.
What do you mean based on no information?
Do I look like...
As a whole, this opening encounter isn't really all that bad. There's even some cute banter between Obi-Wan and Anakin. But this is really distracting to me because this is the first time out of all the prequels where you feel like the story being told to you is actually worth telling. This is the only sequence out of all of the movies that's almost consistently enjoyable. If I could rewrite the prequels, I would just have them set during this movie.
Yeah, just gonna remind people of some of your previous statements.
Star Wars should be simple. We just saw Han Solo talking like a... Star Wars should be simple.
Star Wars should be simple.
If you have a different rewrite and vision in mind, that's fine, but you don't get to turn around and say fuck these movies for telling their own story.
If we put the romantic subplot and the Jedi-Sith conflict into the backdrop of the war, it makes things a lot more exciting. I mean, this shit's called Star Wars, and episodes 1 and 2 don't even take place during a war.
Didn't you just say there was too much action before? If these movies are called Star Wars, and you just want to enjoy space battles, why in the world are you complaining about the length of action scenes?
Yeah! I don't have a lot of bad things to say about the opening of this movie, except that it does kill the pacing a lot. The first quarter of this movie is pretty exciting, but then the movie gets really boring. One of the worst things about this movie is that a majority is based around our characters standing in these cold, lifeless CG environments spewing bad dialogue.
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No. No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
I don't want to watch these movies anymore, guys. I want it to be over.
Let's be real, if you were third-wheeling with any couple who behaved as if you weren't in the room, it would sound awkward as hell. Which is essentially what this scene feels like out of context. In context, Anakin has secretly married this woman. He probably sees her very scarcely enough as it is, but in addition to that, he's been away from her fighting a war for months, and has just found out she's pregnant. He's just soaking it in, marveling at her while she brushes her hair on the balcony, while she's just being about her business. Like I said previously, there's a lot of Shakespearean influence as well as olden-style romance movies for the romantic dynamic between Anakin and Padme, but unlike the fireplace scene in Episode 2, the influence isn't over the top to the point of being jarring. In context, it flows perfectly fine.
The middle chunk of this movie makes one giant mistake in my mind. It splits up Obi-Wan and Anakin. In this opening scene, we get to enjoy our main heroes being together. For the first time out of any of these movies, we actually enjoy watching the main characters. And then George just splits them up and has them go on their own adventures.
Oh, fuck off.
Hold up! You know I don't like it when you do that.
Sorry, Master. I forgot you don't like flying.
I don't mind flying, but what you're doing is suicide!
And don't frame it as George splits them up because he wants them to go on their own adventures. It's part of the story. The Jedi Council sent Obi-Wan off to fight Grievous and end the war, while Anakin was stuck spying for Palpatine, against his own wishes, under the orders of the Jedi Council, which again, he was vehemently against. With Obi-Wan gone, Palpatine can pull the trigger on turning Anakin to the dark side against the Jedi.
And General Grievous is such a weird character to me because I know he only exists so that we can have a cool fight with Obi-Wan in the middle of the movie. The villains in these prequels are just so bad.
The visual does not reflect the statement. Not only is Grievous awesome, if only from an aesthetical standpoint, but he was designed specifically to be the cunning and cowardly villain, as opposed to the strong, silent, intimidating badass that was Darth Maul, and the extremely powerful but civilized Count Dooku. These villains of the prequels aren't the main antagonist for the series, or even their individual episodes. They are essentially henchmen for the true antagonist, which is Palpatine. I guess you could call Maul, Dooku, and Grievous secondary antagonists. And don't forget, the most compelling villain of the prequels is the main protagonist of the prequels, which is Anakin, who hasn't turned yet.
Darth Maul is cool, but he gets kicked out of the movies immediately and doesn't even have any lines.
Yes, he's the strong, silent, dangerous Sith apprentice, who's simply doing his master's bidding. That's a specific design choice. He doesn't have any lines, but at the same time, he didn't really need any.
Count Dooku is probably the worst Star Wars character of all time.
How about new?
His existence is truly baffling to me, and he never develops into a real character. Most importantly, he never becomes a real threat.
It's amazing how every time you open your mouth, you prove you're an idiot!
And then we have General Grievous, who appears out of nowhere just so Obi-Wan can fight something in the middle of the movie and we can sell some toys or something. And then Palpatine is our main villain, but he barely has any screen time until this movie.
Why? Because he wasn't throwing down with a lightsaber? He gets plenty of screen time in these movies. Maybe you were just too busy sleeping through the political talk.
If you ask me, we should have just had Palpatine and Darth Maul in all 3 movies. Narratively, it doesn't change very much in the story, and it would have just cemented Maul as a true threatening force.
I wonder, from what arse end of the circle jerk you dug up that argument? Because I've heard that numerous times as well. Maul was cool, but the reason why Count Dooku was so integral to the story and to Palpatine's plot is because he represents the disgruntled Jedi, who hated the bureaucratic system and started a movement against the Republic. All else aside, Maul wasn't a political idealist like Dooku, nor was he as compelling. He was just a pawn. And just a reminder, I have not seen the Clone Wars, so I'm not using them for my arguments. My arguments are for the films and only the films, because they stand perfectly fine on their own.
If Darth Maul and Obi-Wan actually had this rivalry throughout all of the movies, that would be the coolest shit ever. I'd probably care a little bit more. But anyway, I'm complaining too much. I should probably talk more about this movie specifically. It's just really hard to reiterate the same problems I've already talked about in length in this very video. I can only say so many times that the writing is bad, because it is.
Well, how about instead of saying it, you fucking show it?
And it's bad in all of these movies. I've already proven that. It's not fun to sit and watch this movie play catch-up and try to prove to us that Anakin isn't totally evil, and to prove to us that him and Palpatine are friends.
Well, I suppose sleeping through the previous 2 movies would force you to play catch-up, wouldn't it?
It leads to this movie having 2 modes, way too rushed or way too slow.
I agree partially. I never felt the movie trudge along way too slow. However, because of the size and scale this story tries to convincingly tell, as well as how many loose ends it has to tie up, it does feel a tad rushed in certain instances, particularly the ending. This is without a doubt the most ambitious Star Wars movie from a storytelling aspect, and despite this, the execution of this film as a whole is excellent.
I feel like I could take so many scenes from this movie and either cut them out completely or trim them down. The whole Grievous fight is so stupid, and it's just in the movie to stave off our boredom.
Would you prefer it if Obi-Wan just walked up and shot him in the face? Or would you bitch about that too?
Yoda on Kashyyyk is just here to give us more fan service.
Oh, fuck off. I love how the circle jerk you're pandering to has this selective memory for Chewbacca being the only point of the Kashyyyk sequence, when you're being disingenuous as balls.
And beyond that, we just have more characters talking about politics. What was it about politics that had George so horny? I don't think I'll ever understand. And George will be the #1 guy to tell you that Star Wars is for kids.
Oh, you just remembered that, did ya?
Come on, man. George Lucas, swear to me on your life that you wrote these scenes with children in mind.
Will you defer your motion to allow a commission to explore the validity of your accusations?
No. I'm not letting that slide. Cosmonaut, you're the one who couldn't understand these movies because you were either too stupid, too disinterested, or because understanding these movies would be going against the narrative you are trying to sell here. 12-year-olds could understand these movies well enough. Not perfectly, but enough to understand what the fuck is actually going on. Adults like myself grasped finer details when we became more accustomed to political language and terminology, as well as developing our critical thinking skills. For an internet personality with almost 1 million subscribers to tell me after multiple viewings of the prequels that he still didn't understand the movie, you should be fucking embarrassed.
So anyway, this movie only really starts being interesting again once they find out that Palpatine is a Sith Lord.
A Sith Lord?
But even with this knowledge, the movie still has a distinct lack of energy.
We must move quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive.
Whoa, guys, slow down. My heart's racing.
Oh, fuck off. He's walking to an aircraft that's going to take him to see the bloody Chancellor right now. Even if he starts running to the landing pad, it's not going to help anything. Not to mention, aren't Jedi meant to be calm and composed in times of crisis?
I actually do like slower scenes like this, where it's just Anakin realizing that he's gonna risk it all and interfere with Palpatine's arrest. It's just him wordlessly going through this problem, and for once, it's the movie showing subtlety. The one thing I've craved this whole time. But honestly, it is too little, too late.
Trust me, there's plenty of subtlety you didn't pick up on.
This is halfway through the last movie, and we finally have a scene where our main protagonist is showing his internal conflict in a realistic and believable way. Keep in mind that this internal conflict is the entire reason these prequels exist.
Yes, and what the entire 2.5 movies have been laying the foundation for is what you're seeing play out on screen right now.
And now, with very little believable internal conflict, we get Anakin just deciding on a whim that he is going to murder everyone he knows and loves. And this is the main problem with this movie. The whole purpose of this movie is to show his turn to the dark side, but that should have been the point of all of these movies, not just this one. His conflict doesn't exist at all in Episode 1, and it's not connected to the plot of Episode 2.
Are you fucking shitting me?
Will I ever see you again?
What does your heart tell you?
I hope so. Yes. I guess.
I'm so proud of you, honey.
I missed you. Everything.
If you remove his conflict from that story, it doesn't change anything.
It changes everything, you imbecile. And you're pretending these pieces don't exist to justify your piece of shit narrative. The only way, and I'm dead serious, the only way you can make Anakin's turn look forced and unjustified and rushed is by disregarding or misrepresenting the previous 2 movies. But then again, why on earth would anyone take that argument seriously? Much to my amazement, people do take this argument seriously, and it's fucking retarded.
So as a result, it leads to this movie feeling rushed. It leads to a turn to the dark side that's not satisfying to watch, because this is the first real movie where we've watched it happen. And now at the end of the movie, we have the last of the dumb shit. The final battle in this movie is pretty important for these characters, but the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin is too long. And I shouldn't even have to explain why I don't like this fight. This is a fight between 2 characters that I don't want to see in a fight scene.
Yeah, I should not see Yoda holding a lightsaber isn't an argument either. It's fine if you hate it, I could care less, but it doesn't make the movie any lesser despite the straws you try to grasp at.
But I'd honestly probably hate it less if it didn't end in a ridiculous way. Yoda doesn't even really lose. They Hadoken each other and he kind of just gets knocked down, and then he's like, "It is over. I have failed. Time to go into exile." What the fuck? You didn't even try!
Honestly, I'm kind of in the same ballpark here. First time I watched this as a kid, I was like, what the hell are you doing, Yoda? Get the fuck back up there and kick his ass. But in actuality, Yoda's retreat makes a bit more sense in retrospect. After Yoda failed, the clone trooper reinforcements are shown to have finally come to Palpatine's aid. Yoda also lost his lightsaber during the duel as well. Also, Yoda has been shown to be able to fight intensely in the past using the Force, but only for a short amount of time. I think it's feasible to say that he simply has no more strength left at this point. And finally, the element of surprise was gone. Palpatine thought Yoda or any Jedi worth their salt was dead, so he had his guard down during that small window of time. But for the rest of the trilogy, Palpatine isn't on the scene. He is so protected, in fact, that he only communicates through Darth Vader and his other agents. So in retrospect, I can buy the retreat of Yoda, but a criticism I'm willing to levy is it could have been better presented to the audience. Maybe have Yoda attempt to use the Force, but have him collapse instead, or have him unable to stand, leaving him to crawl away in shame.
Why is this movie so obsessed with just bringing every element back to where we expect it to be for the status quo of the original trilogy to be intact?
Ever heard of continuity, dipshit?
If Yoda tried to win, but then failed and was like, okay, well, Obi-Wan and I will keep trying, better luck next time, I wouldn't even fucking question it. I wouldn't have left the theater like, hey, what the fuck? He didn't go into exile. There's still 19 years of story development between these 2 movies. I wouldn't mind if you left some threads open.
Well, I can respect that to some extent. I kind of find it hard to believe that Yoda and Obi-Wan stayed in their respective locations chilling out for 19 years. But again, it does keep continuity intact, Whether you wanted open threads or not is a matter of perspective, because regardless, it doesn't take anything away from the story.
They shouldn't have just given up after this one attempt. If they both went in to kill Palpatine after this, they probably would have won. That makes the conclusion really weak and unsatisfying.
Do you remember when Yoda said this?
To fight this Lord Sidious strong enough, you are not.
If Obi-Wan fights Palpatine with Yoda, he's just going to get in the way. Need more proof? Look what happened when Mace and 3 other Jedi Masters tried this against Palpatine. The only one who remained was Mace Windu, who was able to hold his own.
It is a conclusion that makes our heroes seem decidedly unheroic, because they just give up. As a whole, I think it's kind of hard to say any more about this movie that I didn't already cover in the other reviews, because I don't think it's fair to judge these 3 movies individually. You have to look at them as a unified picture, because that was what George intended.
Yay, he finally gets it. So why the hell did you decide to ignore all the nuance behind the characters from the previous 2 movies when trying to discredit Anakin's turn to the dark side? His relationship to his mother, his bad dreams, his ambition, his kind-hearted nature, his longing for love in his life and for Padme, and the premonitions he had that came true, which caused him to ruthlessly kill the Tusken Raiders. The prequels are part of a greater whole, and are meant to be watched as chapters of a story. But when it was convenient for you and your narrative, you excluded the other chapters to protect your agenda.
So while this movie isn't the worst out of all of them, I still can't forgive it too much. It still has bad pacing, a stupid if understandable storyline, and more of the George Lucas brand bad dialogue.
Don't make me kill you.
5 out of 10, an improvement, but not enough of an improvement. So that was it. The roughest patch in all of Star Wars. The worst of it is over, and I decided a long time ago, before the new movies came out, that we would never see a Star Wars movie as good as A New Hope. And similarly, we would never see a Star Wars movie as bad as Episode 1.
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
And for a while, I thought I was right. I thought if anything, these new Disney movies would be safe and inoffensive. And I have never been more wrong in my entire life.
They were safe, then they were stupid, then they were sad. And yes, if this series of videos proves anything, is that you were wrong, Cosmonaut. You were wrong pretty much about everything. And wait, it's over. It's finally over! I never have to watch another Cosmonaut video for the rest of my life. I never have to hear that cuckloid's voice ever again. I never have to torture myself with his terrible humor and awful logic and punchable face ever again. Huzzah! Who fucking Ray? Well, everyone, that brings us to a close, I'm afraid. On the real, though, as frustrating as Cosmonaut truly is, I don't have anything personal against the guy. If he reached 1 million subscribers tomorrow, truthfully, I'd probably reach out with a tweet and congratulate him. Love him or hate him, I respect what he's done to an extent. And I think his videos, if nothing else, have excellent production value. Any animosity I have towards him starts and ends with Star Wars, and also the Spider-Man Raimi films, but let's not start that discussion. Like I've said numerous times, Cosmonaut is just another name on the list. He wasn't the first, and he certainly won't be the last. But his video on the prequels in terms of argumentation is probably the worst I've ever seen, and I hope to God I am right about that. As long as he stays on his side of the fence and shuts his mouth about topics important to others that he wants to misrepresent for the sake of views, well, we should be fine. But on that note, thanks for watching this video and for staying for all 5 parts of this response, as well as the other episodes of this series as well. I very much appreciate it. These videos took a long time and a lot of work to make, and it's all worth it, knowing how much you enjoy them. I mean that, truly. But with that said, if you would like to support my work in future videos on movies, television, video games, and possibly other forms of media, including this very series, consider donating to the channel's Patreon. Any and all donations, even if it's just $1 per month, goes a long way in helping creators like myself. I'd like to give a heartfelt shout out and thank you to all of my current and new patrons. Thank you so much for your support and encouragement. I appreciate it very much. And in addition to that, I'd like to thank my YouTube members. Thank you to the Star Killers, the Captain Prices, and the Master Chiefs. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate the support you provide for the channel and these videos. If you would like to become a member, the join button is below, and members tend to stick out in the crowd, including the channel's podcast that I mentioned previously, and get some additional perks on the channel's Discord server. And that brings me on how to contact me. Well, you can tag me on Twitter. I have a Twitter account. Or preferably you can join the channel's Discord server, which is available for everybody, that has a select few chats for patrons and YouTube members. What Discord basically is a discussion forum where other fans of this channel congregate to talk about Star Wars, anime, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, you name it. So please come on by and check it out. You may make some friends along the way. And lastly, don't forget about the channel merchandise store, the link for which is in the description, where you can purchase your Revenge of the Prequels attire, as well as other channel merchandise too. Helps me out a great deal, and let's be honest, there are no sharper threads out there. Calvin Klein himself will be on his knees in your presence. Now, with all that said, here's one more thank you for staying till the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time. Baby, we did it!
The main thing is to protect these characters. Make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
I sold them to the white slavers.
Star Wars The Phantom Menace was the most disappointing thing since...
Share your energy with me! The spirit box meeting! This is great.